The first methods module explained measurement, reliability, and validity, but we didn't include anything about that in the summary process. To be honest, I debated about that and decided it might be a little overwhelming to include it in that phase. After you practice applying the concepts, though, you'll probably find you do want to include this step when you summarize an article. Regardless of when you consider it, there are a few details we can look for to find out about the reliability and validity of a measure. In this class, I'll focus on what those details tell us about the scientific credibility of a study and how they contribute to the meaning of the results. When I think about validity in research, the phrase, "a wolf in sheep's clothing," often comes to mind, because it might seem like a variable is what the researchers say it is, but when we get a little closer, it might seem like something else. You might remember that I used the same illustrations to talk about the difference between science and pseudoscience in the first module, because pseudoscience is sort of like an invalid representation of science. So, how do we know if the specific measures or manipulations in a study were reliable? You might remember that there are three types of reliability we consider for measured variables: test-retest, internal consistency, and inter-rater reliability. In a study, they can be each evaluated with a different statistic. We'll focus on looking for whether the article mentions one of those tests: the test-retest correlation, Cronbach's alpha, or Cohen's kappa. For a manipulated variable, researchers use a process referred to as a manipulation check to determine if the manipulation worked as planned, which requires reliability. The specific form the manipulation check takes varies depending on the variable and how it was manipulated, but it typically takes the form of a measurement of some sort. In some cases, manipulation checks also establish the validity of a manipulation. I'll come back to that in a minute. You might remember the four types of validity from the previous module. Given what we've learned about the relevance of face validity, or lack thereof, we'll focus on content, criterion, and discriminant validity. For measured variables, the tests of validity are often part of a separate study that develops a measure. Given that, evidence of validity is sometimes as simple as seeing someone's name at the end of the sentence that identifies the source. The formal term for the name at the end of the sentence is a citation, so I'll use that term for the rest of the recordings. Presumably, that citation would lead the reader to an article that explains how the content validity was established and reports on a series of studies using other measures. Whether it's a separate study or a manipulation check, the process is similar for manipulated variables. The result of the manipulation is compared to measurements of the same concept or concept. So why does it matter if there's information about the reliability and validity of the variables? And if there is, does it matter if it's weak? I think we can make the case that it matters because reliability and validity are essential for scientific credibility. If that information isn't included, or the numbers are extremely low, then it's wise to discard the article. If the information is included and it indicates that variables were reliable and valid, then we can continue to think about the meaning of the results. This is a good point to pause and review before we get into the deeper details. When we're thinking about reliability and validity for measured variables, we'll look at different information than we do for manipulated variables. The reliability of measured variables is typically represented by a correlation or Cronbach's alpha, while validity information is represented by a citation for primary sources. Those citations are frequently included at the end of a sentence that talks about variables not included in the study. For manipulated variables, we look for the manipulation check, a test of how effective the procedure was. Regardless of whether they're measured or manipulated, we need to look for information about reliability and validity for every variable included in the study. And if there's more than one measure for a variable, we need to find the information for every measure. If that information isn't included or it's weak, it creates concern about the credibility of the entire study. In addition to creating questions about the meaning of the variables, we might wonder if there were other parts of the study that could have been stronger.